Welcome back to another episode. I'm your host, Vincent Green. He's your host, Noel John Tui. We got Carmack in the back, and this is MDK presents Marc Sheffler. Marc, can you please tell the folks who you are and what you do?
Oh, let me see. My name is Marc Sheffler. I'm 72 years old, and I work for my wife. No, I'm a writer and a producer, and started out as an actor. One of the lead roles in Wes Craven's first film, Last House on the Left. And I guess that's why I'm here.
Well, we're going to touch upon The Last House on the Left, but I think that you've had a very storied career, and I'd love to kind of maybe get the full scope of it. Because,
Sure.
Like Last House on the Left, kind of, it's this
It's the entryway,
underground following, and
yeah, it's kind of the entryway for us too, because we have a horror podcast and we love horror. And like it kind of gives us a nice commonality to kind of start our conversation, because we're big horror buffs. And you started in a legendary horror movie with one of the most legendary horror creators that's ever existed in Wes Craven.
His first film, which is now
exactly. Like, so it's a beautiful entryway for us. But we'd love to hear about your, as Noah said, your storied career. Like, but what was it like working with Wes Craven, even in the infancy of his career? Was it like, could you see that he had this kind of gift about him or whatever?
I have to modify what you said. I didn't work with Wes in the infancy of his career. I worked with Wes at the birth of his career.
Get it straight, people.
I wasn't in preschool with him. I was in the delivery room.
I like that. Yeah, that's us put straight, for sure. So, but please tell us a little bit about it.
First of all, Wes was one of the nicest guys I've ever known. He was nice when I met him back in the day, and I saw him about a year before he passed away. So I just give you that kind of beginning and end to it. It was great, man. I was 20 years old as an actor in New York, going around doing auditions and doing stand-up, and just doing anything I could to push myself forward. And one day I walked in to my manager's office, and I was there's an overriding theme to my life and my career, and is that I've been blessed with an extraordinary amount of situational luck, and that is that whenever shit needed to happen the right way, more often than not, like in Woody Allen's Match Play, the ball fell on the right side of the court. Yeah. So I walked in and I said, my manager, I had the same manager as Tom Jones and Engelbert Humperdinck at the time. Lloyd Greenfield. Yes, see, that's what I mean. I just somehow met those guys, and they liked me, and they said, the Dick Towers was my rep, and he.
What a name.
Yeah.
and it's kind of redundant, actually.
Was he a high rise? Was he a high rise?
He was a very tall man. So redundancy. So I walked into his office one day, and he said, "Hey man, I got a movie audition for you." He handed me a slip of paper that had an address on it. And he said, "Go to this address, ask for two guys, Wes and Sean, read a scene, and we'll see what happens." So I went down to the office that he said, and I met a tall, stringy, blonde-haired, skinny guy named Wes, and a shorter, mustache fellow named Sean. Both of them were like late 20s, early 30s at the time. I was 20. So I read a scene, and on my way back to Dick's office, got there, and by the time I had gotten back, they had called and said, "That's the guy we want." And Wes was Wes Craven, and Sean was Sean Cunningham.
Oh wow!
They went to college together, or they lived together for a long time, didn't they? Sean Cunningham and Wes Craven.
I think they were good. They interacted to me as if they were good friends. They didn't just meet each other. They were pals.
Does it seem a bit surreal now when you think of what Wes Craven actually is to the horror world?
And Sean Cunningham, the guy created Friday the 13th, like.
And seeing that you met them in this kind of like, oh, these guys seem nice. But
it's Sean and Wes. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, it's so weird.
So when I mentioned that I saw Wes about a year before he passed. We were both invited to an art exhibition opening at a gallery in Burbank California, which is right by Los Angeles. And some artist had done a multimedia rendering of certain scenes from Wes's movies. And the guy who owned the gallery knew somebody who knew me, and he knew somebody who knew Wes. So they invited us both. So I hadn't seen Wes in, I don't know, a lot of time, years. And I got there first. My wife and I got there first. And then I saw Wes walk in, and it was kind of like a long, narrow gallery. So there was this long hallway between the door and where we were. And he sees me and I see him, and we just kind of like shake our heads and smile and walk to each other. And he extends his hand and I extend my hand. And the moment we shook hands, I look at him and I say, "So what have you been up to?" And he just said, "You're still crazy, man. You're still crazy." Yeah, you don't cure what I have.
Yeah, but you don't want to cure it either.
No, you just learn to live with it.
Exactly.
And exploit it. Right? So we had a wonderful talk. We spoke privately for about 20 minutes, half hour or so, and just kind of caught up, with headlines on our lives. And, that was it. He was a terrific guy and a great storyteller, and had a clear vision of everything that he wanted, even back in the day, even on Last House. That we all worked and we all contributed to it, but the master view was Wes's vision. It was what he wanted.
Yeah, was he the same kind of grounded man a year before he passed? All these successes, Scream, Nightmare on Elm Street, etc. behind him, was he still the same grounded guy that you met in the early 70s?
Same guy. Same.
That's really nice to hear.
He just looked older,
No way around that, unfortunately.
No way around that, right? But I sensed from his demeanor, from the conversation we had, from his friendliness toward me, that he was without a doubt the same guy.
That's awesome to hear.
Yeah.
Why was this your one feature film? Why was it that you decided that the spotlight wasn't for you, and you ended up, I read there's so much behind the camera, but why was this the one and done for you?
Well, it wasn't that it was one and done. It was that it was one and opened my eyes and planted seeds in me that grew into a desire that I wanted to not just be part of a story. I wanted to tell the story, which is why I took a turn into, sort of why I became a writer. It's not the whole reason, but it's the mature explanation of why I became a writer. There's an immature reason, but
No.
Do you think that's why a lot of actors, as they kind of mature in their career, either become writers or become directors? Because instead of just being a part of the story, they want to kind of get into the nitty gritty of creating the story itself or molding the story.
Okay, for actors, I think some of them reach a conclusion that, like I did, that you would rather tell the story than be part of the story. For directors, for writers who become directors, it's a different reason, which I'll tell you guys in a little kind of parable that goes around Hollywood about a writer who had been around for years and years and years and had sort of survived, not survived, had good years, had bad years. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he sells a script for a lot of money, something he had in his drawer, sells it for a lot of money, and his entire lifestyle changes. So he's out the night celebrating the recent success, meets a woman in a club, gorgeous actress, model type, just, he tells her part of his story and she goes, "Wow, that's amazing." One thing leads to another. She invites him back to her place. They get there. It's this beautiful condo overlooking Sunset Boulevard, the lights of LA. It's one of these things that's completely representative of a success, like something that you could see. I'm at the top of the mountain, right? And looking down, she says to him, "Why don't you go to my little bar over there and mix us a couple of drinks, and I'm going to go into my bedroom and slip into something more comfortable." Wow. This writer is like, wow. He goes, he makes the drinks, and he starts walking towards her hallway where her bedroom was. She comes out, and as they're walking toward each other, a director steps out of the bathroom, looks at the writer and says, "That's okay. I'll take it from here." That's why writers become directors.
You know what? That has just really simplified something for me that I will carry with me for the rest of the day. That just like, it was really interesting getting this close to the finish line, but I sure would like to get to that finish line.
Yeah. By the way, I wrote that story. So
did you? Yeah. Oh, okay, a piece of shameless self-promotion. That's what we were all about here.
Well, right before you were finished, did a director come in and just take it over for you?
It's really like, it's a heartbreaking thing when you're the writer. I've been on the set of lots of stuff that I've written, and on the sets rather of lots of stuff that I've written, and I see directors at times, not everyone, but especially in sitcoms, because mostly in sitcoms, directors are traffic directors. They're not really, they take their marching orders from the executive producer, because that's that medium. That's not like film. So I as a comedy person who hears comedy lyrically and as music, I've often watched performances go by where good direction would have, or informed direction would have gotten more laughs out of a scene or more laughs out of a joke. So, I have a series that I'm working on, and I'm partners with a fellow named Gary Hart, who was president of Paramount Network Television for over a dozen years. And we're best friends for a long, long time. So we have a series that we're trying to get moving, and we're casting right now. And I'm going to, I'll be the executive producer on that. And any director I hire will, as pro forma, take his or her orders from me. But in film, it's the director who's the boss, and the writer is like, somewhere below the craft service guy.
You make me kind of put in my head like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, The Shining. Like Roald Dahl wanted his name off of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. He absolutely despised the Shining, famous falling out between Kubrick and King. And while I've never wrote something and had it adapted to film, I obviously don't understand what that's like. But obviously, the picture that's in your head, you wrote it, so the picture that's in your head is by default right. I feel as if this is the world I built, and it's just not.
I agree with you, but in narrow scope, I disagree experientially, and that's because often writers are compartmentalized into that written word thing, and directors are compartmentalized into the visual of it, right? Into what are the pictures. So there have also been times, lots of them, where a director will take the written word and three-dimensionalize it and expand it, and it becomes something better than what was on the page. So every incident is kind of different. In theory, you're right. It's what you said, but yeah, as a writer in a medium like film or television, you have to understand that once you write it, you give it up to somebody else who's also an artist, and that person needs to bring to the table what they were hired to bring. And and sometimes it's good, and sometimes it isn't, and sometimes the director and the writer have conflicts. But ultimately, it's a collaborative medium, and everybody at the end of the day wants the most entertaining product that can be produced. So,
This makes me think of a question, and it brings it back to as when that film came out, and it had obviously controversy around it because there were scenes of sexual violence, there was kidnap, torture, there was murder, all of that kind of stuff. And it was 1972. There was obviously the shock factor that we have now with Hostels and Saws, but it was quite big news at the time. The way you're talking about responsibility as an actor in that film, did you feel that heat at all compared to Wes or somebody higher up in the executive chain? Were you just like, hey dude, I'm just a guy in a film, I don't know what to tell you?
So we shot the movie. I think we got a 20-day schedule, which is a 4 or 5 day week, right? 4 or 5 weeks.
Like a working day is 5. Yeah.
5 working days, right? So it took me 2 weeks to get over the thrill of the fact that I was in a movie. That was that I was actually working in a film. No, I did not. I didn't know a lot then, so I had to I didn't have enough experience to have an opinion, and I knew that. I think I just gave it up to the greater good and said, I'm going to listen to what people who know more about this tell me to do, because I considered myself lucky to have the job and didn't want to be someone who was annoying. And because I kind of worked myself that way, in that month of production, I ended up learning the fundamentals of everything I know today about filmmaking. I mean, the primitive version of everything I know was exhibited during those 20 days.
That's incredible to think about, because even though you've dived so heavily into things like comedy and mediums like that, obviously been in something, again, a controversial early 70s exploitation horror film, it made you so interested in the creative process, and then you took your own flavor and kind of worked outwards with it.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to think about. But being on that set, did you feel like you were a part of something that was going to be a cult classic, or again, were you just a kid wet behind the ears?
First part, what you just said, yes, while we were in production. And then David Hess and Fred Lincoln and I went to a screening of an answer print, that's the final print, at a post-production house in New York. And it was a cast and crew screening. So David, Freddie, and I walked out of the screening room and looked at each other and said, nobody is ever gonna fucking come to see this. This film is gonna come and go. But you see, the weird thing is, Last House, again, it's the luck that I've had in my career. Last House was originally slated to be produced to become a second of a double feature for a company that had called Hallmark Releasing, that had a chain of drive-in theaters in the New England area.
Of the Grindhouse, was it?
No, it was. They owned the theaters. It wasn't Grindhouse, but it was a kind of a Grindhouse
feel,
right? So they have these drive-in theaters, and they wanted a scary slasher double feature for Friday, Saturday date night.
Awesome.
So yeah, so that and that's what it was made. So when it was released, initially, it was released in a small area, and they didn't have a whole lot of money to make back. So they put it on in their drive-ins, and it was doing okay business for what it was, and it was creating all the controversy that you just talked about. And then a couple of months later, in January, the following year, Roger Ebert wrote a 3.5 out of 4-star review of Last House in the Chicago Sun-Times.
Oh, wow.
And, yes, and literally overnight, everything changed. Like from what I remember, they had made like 20 or 30 prints of the film and sent those out to Hallmark. And then after Roger Ebert's review, they had like an order for 1,200 prints of the film to go nation. Yeah, and then all over New York City, there were posters of Last House, and life changed. It just, because of Roger Ebert, it just.
Do you think it's a case of like there's no genre that lends itself better to controversy than horror? Like of all the genres, like nobody say like sometimes bad press is good press. Like for horror,
no such thing as bad press.
Yeah, but
yes, 100% true.
Yeah.
Because what Sean did, to his credit, instead of shying away from the bad press, they leaned into it and went with it and used that as the energy to propel the marketing, which was brilliant. They exploited it. They squeezed every drop out of it that could be, and still, which is unbelievable. Like, I go to horror film conventions pre-pandemic. I was doing 4 or 5 of them a year. And I'd go there and I'd sit and sign autographs and memorabilia for people of all ages, everywhere from my age, who remembers it first run, to teenagers who have seen it at the behest of their parents as a cautionary tale to show them what happens if you go out into the world and make wrong decisions.
That's the thing. The characters that you played were bad guys, not nuanced, not Lex Luthor, not even Michael Myers or Jason, who are like almost paranormal. You were just bad guys. Your character Junior was a little bit more nuanced in controlled and you know, kind of way. But but the characters around you were psychopath, rapists, murderers. So it was just, again,
all around good guys.
It was a cautionary tale, because this was definitely the big bad wolf that the parents were worried about being out there, especially for their daughters.
Absolutely. And it wasn't until maybe just a few years ago that I watched it again and figured out what I thought the movie was about, and the one defining scene. If you guys remember the dinner scene.
Well, after when you're in the house with the parents.
Yes, and there's a scene that Wes shot all in blacks, like there's nothing but black curtains around us, and all the actors were really well lit against a nothing but, not a dining room. You didn't see any furniture except the dining. And in that scene, I realized that what this whole movie was about was class warfare. It was the people who had things and the people who thought they were entitled to have things, and that those people would do anything they could. All bets were off. And then it was the other people defending, their castle.
Just made me realize there's a Sophie. What was the name of the girl in the band in your crew?
Sadie.
Sorry, I know Sophie was wrong, but she said, "This house makes me want to be a lady," or something like that.
Yeah.
I think was the line, which you're just after making me rethink, because she's just in it and she looks around, and she's obviously a psychopath. She's a bad person and stuff.
Yes.
But this would be enough for me. This luxury, respectability.
Yeah, and then it sort of made sense. Then the movie, because I've always had. When I was younger, after I made it, and even in its first run, when it got a lot of notoriety, I was just in it for the girls, man. It was just. I'll let you have that laugh. Because I was 21 when it was released, and. After the Roger Ebert thing, and when the film went wide, I was asked to go back to Pittsburgh, where I was born and live, and open the film at a big movie theater downtown, one of those great old kind of ornate Baroque movie theaters that coincidentally my father's cousin was the general manager of the theater.
Your look is weird.
Yeah.
You're right. There is a theme here.
No. I'm going to digress here for a sec. But my series, the series that I was telling you about, is called Those 7 Years. And what it's about is when I was 14, my father and I were in that theater watching Jerry Lewis in The Nutty Professor. And as the film ended and the credits were rolling, I made some comment to my dad about, wow, how great it must be to be in the movies, and what a life Jerry Lewis must have. And my father just looked at me. My father was like this very out-of-the-box aluminum siding salesman character. And he looked at me and he said, well, maybe you'll find out one day. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, you're funny. You make people laugh. People do that every day in the movies. Why not you? And I didn't really have an answer for him. So we made this kind of little deal, right? We made a deal that I said, okay, Dad, whatever you say, one day I'll star in a movie that's going to be on this screen. And my father said, and when that happens, we'll ride to the premiere in a limousine together. So now cut to 7 years later, Last House on the Left opens up at the Stanley, and my dad and I ride there in a limo together. So the series is about what happens in those 7 years, that the journey of that.
Actually, a genuinely beautiful story. But I just picture you in the limousine, and your father saying, "What kind of character do you play?" And you're like, "Don't worry about it."
He's a good guy.
The picture opens up in Pittsburgh, and quite surprisingly to me, there were several girls in my high school graduating class who, a scant 3 years earlier, would not give me the time of day. Right? Well, now they were willing to give me the time of day and a whole lot more. And I remember being with one of them, and in the middle of it, I had this thought. I said, wow, what a career choice. So what happened was, all films have a life cycle. So, in a shelf life. So, it went up and had a peak and dropped down very quickly. And so there I was back to being, I'd gone from this high of being, semi-celebrity person to just another out of work actor. So one night I'm at a party and my sex life was just like dead. It was just from being flooded to being, dry as a desert. So I'm at a party and I watched this guy who wasn't any better looking than I was, with this beautiful model. And I lean in close and he's saying, well, yeah, I'm fleshing out my concept and I'm looking for my character arcs. And, I believe I've got all my act breaks where I want them. And then what I've got to do is kind of weave in a subplot and an underlying narrative. And this girl is fucking hypnotized, man. It was like, wow, she's just staring. And they end up leaving together. I see him take her by the hand and they walk out the door. And I had an epiphany. I said, I could do that. I could tell girls I'm a writer. So I did. I bought a bunch of books and I learned, I gave myself a quick tutorial on writing words and, the jargon of the profession. And I was going around to parties and doing that same thing. So one day I'm in a commercial audition in Manhattan. And the director was a fellow named N. Lee Lacy. I don't know if you guys ever heard of him, but do you follow American football at all? You know anything about American football?
A little bit. But...
Okay, so there's a very famous commercial with an older NFL championship player by the name of Mean Joe Green. It's a Coke commercial with Mean Joe Green.
In the tunnel.
Yes.
The tunnel, we know the one.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the one. So this guy, Lee Lacy, who I had become friends with because I'd auditioned for him, I'd done a couple of commercials for him. He's the guy who directed that commercial.
Cool.
Yeah. So I'm in his office in the waiting room, and I'm doing my thing to a girl, and I'm saying my character. Talking to an agent on the coast, and I had it all. By that time, I had it like down perfectly. It was a solid hunk of material. So I'm talking to her, and then I feel a tap on my shoulder, and I turn around, and it's Lee, and he said, "Hey, listen, I want to read that when you're finished." So I said, "Hey, let me tell you something." So I took him aside, and I said, "Look, man, I'm not really writing anything. I'm just doing this to get laid. That's it. Do it for the girls." So he said to me, "Does it work?" Yeah, nearly all the time. He said, "Then you're an idiot." And I said, "Why?" He said, "Because you need to use this for a much better purpose. Don't use it for evil. Use it for good."
Oh, your Obi-Wan came in.
Yeah. So he said, "I want you to write something. I want you to actually write something." So I ended up writing a script, which he did give to his agent in Los Angeles, who sold it to NBC. And that's what moved me to California. So I go back to this quirky luck that I have, that at the right moment in time, when something needed to happen to get me forward, it happened. So that's the real reason of how I became a writer.
I literally faked it till you met it. I mean, I know that's the trope.
Yeah.
Fake it till you make it, yeah.
Yeah, I'm still faking it.
So, like, with the ups and downs of your career, because it sounds like it was a very fluctuating time, was there ever a time where you bottomed out and you just thought, because it's between 1972 and me talking to you right now, it's a lot of years that have gone by.
Yeah, sure.
Was there ever a time where you just bottomed out? Like, you had a taste of success, and I know that you said it was a dry period, and then you faked it till you met it. And I'm not sure what comes next, to be honest, but did it ever just bottom out?
Well, define bottom out, because
I suppose going back to a life less ordinary, going back to
I've never had a real job in my entire life.
Once again, nice.
Closest I ever came was from 2010 to 2015. I taught screenwriting and television writing and comedy writing at Loyola Marymount University's School of Film and Television. But that's about the closest I've ever come to a real job. There were times when I wasn't working as much, but I had a lot of residuals coming in from stuff that I had done. So, and then there were times that were lean, but I managed to get by. So I've been able to pretty much maintain that the entertainment industry is the only real occupation I've ever had. I've never lost, I guess, because I started the way I sort of started was when I was 10 years old. My father, again, out of the box aluminum siding salesman guy, came to me and said, "You're going to be 10, double digits. You're growing up. I want to give you a special birthday present this year. What do you want for your birthday?" So I said, "The Three Stooges," and he got them for me. He hired them to perform at a birthday party he threw for my 10th birthday. And that picture right over there is a picture of me and the Three Stooges at my birthday party. So
that was nice. Can I just process that for just 2 You just randomly threw in that the Three Stooges were at your 10th birthday party. Your dad was a really nice dude. Mike, just side note, your dad was a really, really good dude, man.
Oh no, he was amazing. He was amazing. And so we're at the birthday party, and it was in a huge nightclub in Pittsburgh that where they were doing a 2-week gig. So we had about 60 people, friends and family, and parents who couldn't believe this was happening. So they showed up too. And in the middle of their performance, Mo stops the show, and he says, "We know we're all here to celebrate Marc's 10th birthday. Where's Marc?" So I raised my hand, and Mo says, "Hey, Marc, come up on stage with us." So I went up on stage, and I knew all of their stuff. I knew all of their material because I was a rabid Three Stooges fan at the time. And I started to interact with them. And you got to imagine that I'm on stage. I'm 10 years old. I've got lights in my eyes. I can't see the audience. I'm in front of a microphone, and I'm getting laughs and applause and laughs and applause. And suddenly Mo puts his hand on my head and says, "I dub you the Fourth Stooge." Huge applause. And at that moment in time, I closed my eyes, I believe, and I felt this warmth, this embrace, this, must be what doing heroin for the first time.
I was about to make a joke about, like that, to say the first time's free kind of joke about that first time of just, because I got a chill when you said that. I mean, that's
that moment. Yeah, that moment changed my life. Changed my life. That moment aimed my life. Right.
I think it both. I think it was on a. I think it both.
Did they jip you on the royalty checks? Did you see any Stooges money?
Did you see any of that Stooges?
Any of that Stooge money afterwards? No. They gypped you.
I was that from that moment forward. Everybody, my father has passed away, but my father's younger brother, who's alive, is like 93 years old now, and he tells me that when I was a kid, all I wanted to do was watch stand-up comedians on TV and do he said that's all you ever cared about, and I guess like nobody in my family who is surprised that my life ended up where it did. Well, sure, of course. All my friends, I'm still friends with a bunch of guys that I grew up with, and none of them are surprised.
You actually are, even just talking to you, clearly you're a very funny guy. But I'm surprised that, because obviously the writing was what really spoke to you. But it sounds like there was probably a little bit of a performer in you. You definitely explored your creative side more than you explored your performer side. Or I don't know your life. I'm sorry, I'm speaking out of place.
So when I got to LA after I sold that script, I had William Morris Agency as my agents. And one day in a meeting, they said to me, well, what else do you want to do besides write? Pilot season isn't for a couple of months. There's nothing really going on till then. What do you want to do? And I said, well, I did a lot of stand-up back in New York, and I told them my history that I had worked for a comedian, a pretty well-known comedian on the East Coast of the United States, and that I became part of his act. And I did about 150 club dates with him, and then ended up with 2 weeks at the Copacabana. And they said, okay. So they called Mitzi Shore at the Comedy Store, who owned the Comedy Store, and told her about me. And she said, well, I don't know who he is, so I'm not going to make him a regular, but I'll give him a time on a Monday night. Monday night was potluck night, open mic night. So instead of having to stand in line and, take that chance, she, as a favorite of William Morris, gave me a 9:30, 10 o'clock, a pretty good spot. So I went on, and I did really well. It wasn't brilliant, but it was competent.
Thunderous applause, but you did.
Because to backtrack a bit, I started hanging out there a couple of weeks before the time that I had was, I knew it was going to be. And I saw comedians, like Tim Thomerson and Steve Bluestein and Paul Mooney all on the same show. I shit my pants because that Catskill Mountain shit that I was doing, it wasn't going to fly here. It was just, it would make me look like I'm 90 years old. I didn't want to do that. So I had to write a whole new 5 minutes, which I did. That was much more current, much more California, much more, on cutting edge stuff. And like I said, I went on, I did it, and it was fine. So they invited me back. On the second night, I had done some rewriting because I recorded my set and I fixed it and tweaked it, and it was incrementally better than the first time. So they invited me back. And then on the third time, I go to this luck thing that all the comedians on before me had done really well. So the audience was at a good level, right? It was buzzing. And I had a 10:30, 10:45 spot, which is prime. It's prime territory. And I went on and I killed it. I just crushed it. It's like every joke worked better than I'd hoped. The audience, and I attribute that to where the audience was. And it just, I walked off to thunderous applause, and I saw Mitzi sitting in her booth. And I went up to her and I said, hey, Mitzi, does it have to get any better than this? And she looked at me and said, all right, Mark, call in for spots. And that was how I became a regular. Got my name on the wall at the Comedy Store. And so I've had this weird luck. I mean, I can, I'm writing a book right now called As Luck Would Have It. And,
great name.
And it just kind of highlights that whenever I've needed that kind of, extra human luck that happens to people to push myself forward, it's pretty much been there. So
it kind of goes to show, though, sometimes you have a little bit of destiny, that kind of way, because all of those things, it'd be one thing if you're like, I had one bit of luck, but in the 4 or 5 stories you told us, they nearly all were a chain reaction. They all led to one another, that kind of way, so it's is that weird kind of destiny feel about it, though, isn't it? You were destined to be in show business,
You've also got a little bit of humility about you, even when you were just talking about. Because again, I always go to Kanye West as just the person, my absolute apex of the lack of humility.
Good old Yeezy.
But I always kind of think, when you were saying, yes, you were helped by the fact that the comedians that went up there before you were excellent and they did a real good job. And it was a bit of accuracy. But you managed to capitalize on that, and that's all you. But at the same time, you have recognition that.
Oh yeah.
My ducks were in a row. Again, and I think you need both. I think you need to know your own worth, but realize sometimes that it worked out. And cut it
Here's the equation. I think encapsulates what you said. I am by nature my own favorite subject. But I'm humbled.
Think of him.
At the same time, I am humbled and grateful to the universe that I'm somebody worth talking about.
Not yet. Soon. Wait till my book comes in. So, right, we have Marc Sheffler, and we're going to go to a quick break. This is MDK Presents, and we'll be back in a couple of moments. Welcome back from the break, and smooth. Mark, so before we went to the break, we were talking about your career, and one thing I wanted to talk to you about was a show I loved growing up, watching it on TV, was Sister Sister. And I know you worked on that on Tia and Tamara, something like I literally watched nearly every episode growing up. And what was it like working on that show? And because I know it was primarily like a production of people of color and stuff. So what was it like kind of doing it? Did you have to kind of change your style of humor, or did you have to kind of get in a different mindset when you were writing on a show like that?
Okay, I didn't actually work on the show. I did one episode of the show, and so I had. Unfortunately, I have no stories about that because I had no interaction. I would just go into the office, break the story, write a draft, go in for notes, right? So I know that it's on my resume that I have nothing to say about it.
Fair enough, but when was it a case? Like, how does that happen? I'm sitting there. I'm a writer. I'm Marc Sheffler. And I look great in hats, and I
great in hats.
That's dapper, man. Straight up dapper. But,
by the way, I had 200 some hats, and I wore this one especially because I knew Irish guys. I figured.
Yeah, and it was fun. But tell me, I'm just sitting there. How does my day play out that I end up writing one episode of Sister Sister? Or Charles in Charge, or whatever. Like, how does that happen? Do you get approached?
Charles in Charge is a different story, but I'll give you the Sister and Sister 411. I wrote that episode probably I started that job probably about a week after my first marriage ended. And the way that episode happened was, I call your attention back to the fellow I mentioned was my producing partner in the series, Gary Hart. At that time, he was the president of Paramount, where Sister Sister was being produced. So when I found out my marriage was ending, I called 3 or 4 male friends and told them, one of whom was Gary Hart. The other was a PGA golfer by the name of Brad Faxon, who's a good friend of mine, and a couple of comedian friends. When I told Gary what was going on, he said to me, Gary's the sweetest man in the world, like just a really sweet guy. And he said, "How are you feeling?" And I said, I'm fucked up. I don't know what I'm going to do, and I got to get my mind on something else. So he called me back like 2 hours later, and he said, "Here, I got you a Sister Sister episode. They'll call you when they want to do the meeting." But and like that day, he issued the contracts, and that's how that happened. Charles in Charge is different. Charles in Charge, I was writing partners with Lee Aronson at the time. Lee went on to work with Chuck Lorre and do 2.5 Men. So that's create 2.5 Men. So Lee and I were writing together at the time. Lee was also a stand-up. We met at the Comedy Store, and then he went on to work on Love Boat, which I wrote also an episode. So Lee knew Bill Greer, the executive producer of Charles in Charge. So he contacted him and asked if we could come in and pitch some stories. We went in and pitched a half a dozen springboards. They liked one. We wrote an episode. They loved it. We wrote another episode after that. And one when Bill and his wife Kathy, who were the show-running executive producers, and Al Burton, who was the company executive producer, saw that we could write the show, they then offered us a job as executive story editors, which a term for like writers on the show. So I ended up doing like 10 episodes of Charles in Charge, and that was a very well-run show. It was a lot of fun to do. At the time, Scott was not the political right-wing extremist. Yeah, and Willie Ames was fine. It was everybody on the cast. I mean, it's fine. It was a great gig. Being a writer on a sitcom in LA or New York, that's the best I mean, if you just want to work a few hours a day and a few hours at night and make a lot of money and have a great time, that is.
You're literally like, I mean, you're whispering sweet nothings into his ear. Right?
Here was our schedule. Here was our schedule on Charles in Charge. We get to the studio like at 10. First of all, it's Monday to Friday, right? Weekends off. So we get to the studio around 10. Don't really have anything to do. Sit around, play with the machines, take a walk around the lot, Universal, come back, do a little work, look at this week's script, write some jokes for it, go to lunch, come back from lunch, have maybe a meeting about something with it, run through it, 3:30, 4 o'clock, notes after run through, you're home like in 10 minutes. So it's like a 6.5 hour workday, right? So and then on a tape day, it's even less than that because you go in and you do 2 versions of the show, a dress and an air, and you go home.
Sorry, could you break down what a dress and then just to a Joe Soap like myself?
Dress to set.
Okay, so the way shows were done when we were doing that is they would have a studio audience for 2 performances. One would be a dress, right, and which means that it's a dress rehearsal.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, it's a dress rehearsal, but they tape it because in case there's something that they can lift out of it.
Something magic happens, they don't want to miss it.
Yeah, they don't want to miss it. So they do a dress rehearsal, which they tape, and then they take that audience out and they bring in another audience, and they do what's known as the air show, which is the show that they're going to use as the master for the final version. And you go home. It's just it's a wonderful life. It's a magical life to do that. It's just
I was going to say, as a writer, like when you work on a sitcom like that, where the characters are often well established, maybe before you come on and start working on it, is it harder for you to kind of craft the jokes because the characters themselves are already established and the style of humor or the style of the way they're portrayed on screen is kind of like already expected by the audience, or is it easier kind of crafting a character that's kind of original to yourself or whatever?
So it's not any more difficult. It's just another skill set. When you learn how to do that, you first of all, Lee and I watched a half a dozen episodes of Charles in Charge before we pitched shows. We knew that we had read a couple of scripts, so we understood their format, and from their format, we understood how they do their stories. Which is why I have, it didn't surprise me that when we pitched them, they were going to buy one of them because they hadn't done those stories yet, and they were good Charleston stories. And Al Burton, as I mentioned, the executive producer, came out of Norman Lear's camp. He worked for Norman for many years, and he had a rule, and that was don't pitch any story for Charles in Charge if the first word isn't Charles. And that gives you great guidance on. That does
sound right. If you were just saying, here's my idea, Charles, and then it's.
Every pitch, if he wouldn't listen to a pitch if the first word wasn't Charles, and it wasn't.
So if he said to you like, "How are you today?" You kind of go, "Charles."
Yeah.
You're not catching me.
So, working on the show. Us working on the show was an evolutionary step from us writing the first episode. Once we wrote the second episode, they were convinced that the first episode wasn't a fluke, that we actually could write the characters. And it's just real simple. You just think in the voices of the characters that, and the fact that they are so clearly defined in many ways makes it easier.
Because you have a template.
Yeah, exactly. You don't have to make anything up. You just have to listen. Just have to hear their voices in your head.
Did you, when you were talking about it was great, it was a lot of fun, it was an easy work day, but did it ever, I'm just trying to think of the macro of it, this is something that's going to hit I wouldn't have liked to have been the comedy writer, and comedy writer would be my dream job, but I wouldn't like to have been the comedy writer that wrote Fonzie jumping the shark. You're still putting a product out that's going to be seen by millions of people, and if you absolutely shit the bed completely,
Right.
It could be devastating. You know,
I worked on Happy Days reunion special, so I've seen every episode, and I know all those guys, and I knew Gary Marshall. Every decision, every large creative decision on any television show is the decision of the executive producer. So whatever anything, including jumping the shark, my guess is that for whatever reason, Gary made that decision.
Yeah, I suppose, yeah. So you never felt, you were like, okay, I wrote this script, they buy it, they don't buy it. They're the only two things in your mind, not like how it's going to be received when it goes on air or anything like that, because there's too many people in the process for you to feel that all of that pressure is...
Yeah. The way television scripts are generated, especially in-house, meaning from the writers on the show, is that you come up with half a dozen springboard ideas, you know, like the things that you would read in the newspaper about what that episode is about. That's a log line or a springboard, depending on your, you know, what you want to call it. So you then go pitch that to the showrunner, to the executive producer. Once they say yes, you start getting paid. And what the audience doesn't know is that writers who work on TV shows get paid twice. They get paid as per their staff position, whether they're staff writers, story editors, executive story editors, co-producers, or producers. And they also get paid individually for each episode. So that's a separate fee. So once they say yes to an episode, that then triggers a whole process. And most TV deals are known as step deals, which means it goes step by step. So the first thing you do is once somebody says, yeah, we like that story, let's break that story and see what it looks like. You then write the narrative of the story, you know, which is a narrative outline of the story that takes it from beginning until end with little paragraphs that delineate what's happening in each scene.
The main beats.
Yeah, and exactly, the beats. And then once that gets approved, then you go from story to teleplay. That's why you see a lot of separate credits that say story by and then teleplay by. But if it's the original writers who write the story and the teleplay, you're just going to see a written by credit. So I never, you know, I've always been thrilled to have every job I have. So that how it's received, I try to do the best work I can. But how it's ultimately received, because of exactly what you said, that there are so many people with their fingers in that pie, that I'm just a contributor to it, right? I'm a significant contributor, but just a contributor.
Have you ever found yourself holding back on jokes that you're like, because you're a stand-up comic and you're a comedy writer, so does there ever be a chance you're like, oh, that's a pretty good joke, I'm going to keep it for myself?
Yeah. Not for that reason. Not really. I'm sort of like, I'm a reflexive joke writer, so I write jokes every day of my life. And because I see the world a certain way, and the world is a setup for me, and I just provide the punchlines. So I just no.
I'm robbing that.
That's a T-shirt. That's a T-shirt right there.
That's mine. That the world is set up for me, and I'm just writing the punchline. That's my epitaph.
That's the way it is. You know. So no, I think. I don't do that. I think, you know, I'm being paid to be me.
Just do the job, kind of thing.
I need to honor that.
But there has to be a polarity between writing for Nickelodeon and writing for HBO Max.
Correct. But I'm not a guy who would write for Nickelodeon.
Well, that's fair enough. That's good to know. Tell me what happened when I was reading your IMDb. I came across something, and it's just tweaked my curiosity. Was what happened with the, I assume, ill-fated Little Shop of Horrors pilot?
I was doing a lot of work at NBC, and I got a call one day from Stu Sheslow, who was at that time the senior vice president of comedy, and called me up and he said, "Hey, listen, would you be interested in writing a Little Shop of Horrors pilot?" And I said, "Sure." So I made a deal. I think it was Chuck Freeze was the company at the time. I don't know what happened to it. I wrote it, and nothing ever happened.
Developmental hell.
So it wasn't development. Yeah, did it just fizzle out from your perspective? Did it just fizzle out there? You gave it over and nothing came of it.
Yeah, because even if they didn't like my script, they would have hired somebody to rewrite it. And if they were dead set on doing it, it would have gotten done. And my credit would have shrunk considerably, but still, it would have gotten done. So I don't know. Those are decisions that at the time way above my pay grade. I knew that. And I was thrilled to be doing this. By that time I'd gotten myself a nice little house in Laurel Canyon. I was driving a nice car. I was out partying. I hadn't yet given up stand-up completely. So I was doing stand-up and hanging out. I mean, it's just, just that party, that I say party life, but it really wasn't a party. It was just the lifestyle that I led, and me and a lot of other people.
Is your pursuit to enjoy life, or is your pursuit more so
You guys got to imagine that like when I wasn't working on a show or a script, my life was like I wake up in the morning in my house in Laurel Canyon and smoke a joint, go get something to eat. I wake up around noon, go down and to Schwab's Pharmacy was still there at the time. And I'd have breakfast with Johnny Dark and Tom Dreesen and Steve Landesberg and Murray Langston, who's the unknown comic, and a bunch of other people. Come back, smoke another joint, write some more jokes, take a nap, wake up about 7, make something to eat, get dressed, go out, hang out at the Comedy Store with Robin Williams and David Letterman and Jay Leno and Tom and Johnny and Michael Keaton and all these people. And
just Robin Williams.
It's called Sundays, man. We all have it.
Yeah, right. It was like Tuesday through Saturday, right?
Yeah, that's me, Letterman. That's him calling me now, but I'm with you. I'm not going to take it.
Yeah, I tell you a funny. Digress to a funny Letterman story. There was we had comedy groupies at the store, like these. And they're just as good looking as music groupies. And they would just hang out, and they would, these girls would just fucking love comedy and love comedians. So once I got to the Comedy Store and had, been on stage a few times, I realized I never had to go to a singles bar the rest of my life. This is all I needed, right? So you know how like singers are on stage, and if there are women that they want to mess around with, they'll see them in the audience and they'll start crooning them, they'll singing their song, right? And there's and then the whole audience blacks out, and there's just a spotlight on the girl. So
it makes me think of Courtney Cox and Bruce Springsteen.
Exactly. So comedians do the same thing, only they do the setup to the audience and the punchline to the girl.
Ooh.
So, yeah.
I like that.
So, what happened was I was in there one night on stage, and there was a girl in the audience. And I was doing that. I was doing that thing, and afterwards, as I suspected, she got to me right after. It was one of these things where you don't have to worry about separating the girl from her friends, that she separated herself. So,
has wandered off from the pack.
Yeah. So we end up back in my house, which is great because my house was like a minute and a half from the store. And after she looks at me and she said, I think I should tell you that I'm seeing another comedian. And I said, okay, first time we're together, no one's making plans here, live your life. So she said, well, don't you want to know who it is? And I said, no, not really.
Yeah.
Doesn't really interest me.
You met her an hour ago.
Right. She said, well, I'm going to tell you anyway. It's David Letterman. And I said, oh, okay. And she said, well, you don't have anything to say to that? I said, well, yes, I do. And she said, well, what do you have to say? And I told her, I said, I admire your range. And wait, to be perfectly truthful, I never said anything to David, and I have no proof that she was telling me the truth. I'm only telling you the story that happened. You know,
I just wonder if it's the comedian version of it's like, is he funnier than me? It's not the size of the funny, it's how you use it.
it's funny you mentioned that. Among the guys that I hung out with on a regular basis there, which would include David and Leno and Robin and Tom and Johnny Dark, and we didn't really have, we weren't competitive with each other. We were all so different.
Yeah.
You know,
see, I think that's the thing as well. It wasn't that you were trying to go for an exact same demographic of people. It's not like when you write a comedy show and you're trying to compete with a network for a time slot for a demographic. It's not like that because making people laugh is too big a concept. Nobody owns that.
Like we weren't in competition. There was no because we used to play softball together and hang out, and there was this. I hate to use that overused word camaraderie, but that's about really what it was. Those of us who were part of the original class of '77, right? The guys who were there before the strike and then after the strike in '79, we were a fairly tight-knit group. And none of us were, we would support each other. You know, I remember we would go, a bunch of us, many nights would go to there was a hotel next to the Comedy Store, then was the Hyatt House. And we would go there after the store closed and go over each other's acts and sit there and help and say, no, you could do it better this way, do it better that way. So there wasn't that thing. Which is, I never mention this to David, right? If you can imagine that scene. Hey, David, are you fucking this girl named Nancy?
He's probably like, forward him.
Which Nancy?
Yeah, right, exactly. So, I never said anything. And again, I have no actual proof that she was telling the truth, but I suspect she might have been.
Yeah. And also, it doesn't sound like it really mattered to you because it doesn't sound like you were competitive in any aspect of it.
Any facet. Yeah.
I mean, I suppose if I was to do something like that, I'd be thinking, I hope people laugh. And that isn't it. Like everything else will fall in place if that works. It's not really all that matters. It's not like trying to build a business empire where you have to steps and plans and 5-year plans. If you make people laugh, I'd imagine that it'll play. If you were saying that you went up and you had a killer set and then you were able to approach her and go, well, did I get the job? Is that enough? And she's going, call in for a slot. You made people laugh. The chips fall where they may.
That's it. See, success and everything that brings and means is merely a byproduct of making people laugh. In comedy, that's it. If you can make people laugh consistently on cue, and you're good at it, and that things just happen. It's just if you do that in the right place, it's going to happen.
Where's the hardest venue that you've done a set at? Where you just done a set and it just didn't hit right or something,
Oh.
He's asking you where you bombed. Let's just break the question.
I gratefully have not had many of those, but I've had sets where it was a strange scenario. Like I opened for a band called Tower of Power once at the Roxy in LA, and
Tower of Power is an interesting thing. From the Frank Zappa song Bobby Brown, I've heard. Yeah. I can take about an hour on the Tower to Power as long as I get a little golden shower.
I didn't realize this until Argus Hamilton, a comedian friend of mine from the store, told me that I was the first one of our group to break out and get an opening spot for a rock band, and it happened to be Tower of Power. So a bunch of my friends came to that show. Argus was there, and Mark Summers, and some other guys that we knew, and they wanted to watch. So I did a bit in my act, in like the first third of my act, where I did an impression of a pigeon eating a saltine cracker, and they didn't put a stool on the stage for me, so I had to take my glasses off and put them down so I could do the bit properly. And then after I did it, I couldn't find my glasses because of the lights. So I was trying to do my material in opening for a rock group and nobody really wanted to listen to me. They wanted the band, and it didn't matter what I was saying. The crowd was noisy, and according to what my friends told me, about 10 times I came this close to stepping on my glasses. So that was not an emotionally satisfying event for me.
Yeah. Because you don't want to be ignored.
No.
That's a strange thing. I've heard that Bill Hicks opened for Tool and stuff like that, and I remember thinking, is that a thing? Because it's not really a thing here in Ireland.
Warm up the crowd.
Yeah, I know. Warm up the crowd. Usually it's like, like a lesser known rock band open for a bigger rock band.
Yeah.
But it's rock and rock, or it could be a rock, it could be rap, it could be R&B. Lesser opening up for bigger, but inside the same genre. Then I realised that in the States, probably in a lot of places, that people making the crowd laugh apparently can gear them up for like metal, rock and roll.
Yeah. That used to be a big thing, is to have comedians open for rock bands.
That's incredible to me.
Yeah, like my friend, the late Glenn Super, Mr. Bullhorn, he opened for the Beach Boys, and he opened for George Carlin for quite a long time.
Oh,
so,
George Carlin,
yeah. So yeah, it was a thing. I don't know if it's a thing anymore, but I certainly wouldn't want to be somebody opening for a rock band right now. I had my taste of it.
If I was a cruel god and I was able to take away aspects of your career, your writing, your I suppose the Glass House on the Left, which kind of got you started, what would be the one thing that you would fight for? Would be the stand-up? Is that the thing that just, when you look back on you, which one of those things brought you most joy ultimately? Would be a very simple way of asking the question.
I think what has brought me the most joy is recognizing that I have a sense of humor, like a marketable commercial sense of humor, and that I have the ability to make lots of people laugh at will. Mm-hmm. And that, to me,
powerful thing to put that. It is those genuinely powerful.
That is the thing that I cherish most about myself, because that's what drives everything else.
That's
And
now that you're 72 years young, is there any sign of you slowing down, or are you just going to?
No, I told you I'm a reflexive joke writer. I write jokes every day of my life. I don't like try to write jokes. I just see them and then write down what I see, and usually they're funny. I'm back to doing stand-up. I do, but.
So there was a hiatus, I take, from the way you put that.
Yeah, there was a big hiatus, like 35 years. That's okay. I suppose it's a bit of a hiatus.
Are we going to give it that?
So for me, stand-up, I told you guys that I said earlier in this interview that I told you a story and I said I hadn't yet made the decision about writing versus stand-up. At some point, I realized that I didn't want to be on the road. I don't really like that life. I don't, I like.
Did you age out of it, or did you never like it?
I never liked it.
Fair enough.
I never liked it. I don't like long car rides. I don't like to travel other than for pleasure or for a really lot amount of money.
Yeah.
I just didn't want to do that. And I was getting a lot of writing jobs. So I wanted to be a father. I wanted to have children. I wanted a stable family life. So at some point I made the decision. I got couple of writing jobs in a row, and I had to be in studios. And I was starting to get to the point where I really had to work, where I had to learn, and it was not goofing off anymore. It was real work. So I made the decision that I had to stop doing stand-up. And throughout the years, whenever I saw my friends, doing their stand-up or performing, I wouldn't say it was regret, but it was a pain. It was
like a longing.
Yeah.
A longing. So for me, stand-up was the girl who got away, right? The girl who I said, no, I can't be with you. And it was my choice. I take full responsibility for it, right? I did it. And I knew, and I did it with open eyes and everything else. But still, so in 2015, I was in a really bad accident. I got hit by a car, walking home from a grocery store to my place in LA, and I was hurt really badly. I had broken bones everywhere, and I was on a lot of pain meds. And the interesting thing that happened was that every time I'd get my medicine, my pain medication, my mind would go back to 1977 when I was at the Comedy Store, and I would just kind of relive those days of doing stand-up, and that was palliative for me. That took away the pain. That helped me more than the medicine. The medicine was just helped me get to that place inside my head, but the memories are what kind of like numbed me to the pain that I was having. So when I got better and I got a little more ambulatory, I started hanging out at the Comedy Store thinking that, yeah, maybe I'll go back and do stand-up. So I watched and I listened to the audiences and I listened to the comedians. And I came to the realization that no one was going to give a shit. No one was, so what? I had a great career. They're new people. Nobody fucking cares. Get real. So I put it to bed, right? I said, just, worry about some writing. I'm writing a book. I'm doing some things, whatever, working on that. So, I don't know, it must have been like 2 years later, year later, I was in my shower and I just had one of those self-evaluation moments, man. I was taking a shower and I was just looking at myself and I said, fuck, man. I really got down on myself for giving up stand-up because I can't express to you guys the thrill that there is when you're on stage and you've got a microphone in your hand and you're just talking and everybody's reacting. It's like you have, they're in your tractor beam and if you're really good, they're not going to get out of it until you let go. So I got out and I said to myself, I just shaved my beard. My beard was like down to here. And I said, you're just like this skinny old fucking used up Jewish guy. No one gives a shit. You piece of shit. And I looked out at myself in the mirror and just really was down on myself. And all of a sudden, again, that fucking luck that I have, I looked at my image and I had a twinkle in my eye and I saw it. And then I had a thought and I looked at myself and I said, don't go away. I'll be right back. So I ran into my bedroom and into my closet and I put on a black suit with a white shirt and a black tie. And I have a hat collection I mentioned. And I put on a big fedora and I walked in to my bathroom, wiped the fog off the mirror and looked at myself. And I said, now.
Wow. That's awesome.
I go on stage, as you see, as El Yid, former kosher chef. And I created a character in that instant that was a combination of my maternal grandfather and the rabbi of the synagogue that we belonged to. So I said afterwards, maybe this is real, maybe it isn't. So I ended up writing for 6 months this character. I wrote joke after joke after hunk after hunk after hunk. And at the end of 6 months, I was convinced that I wasn't like blowing smoke up my own ass. I called up a young kid who I knew who ran an open mic and I said, hey, I need 15 minutes. I'm going to show up as a character. He said, hey, just come on, man. I'd love to have you. So I went to this guy's place and I went on stage and I did 15 minutes and it fucking worked. And the audience did what I thought it would do the moment I walked on stage. They shut up and started to listen. Yeah. That image alone makes people quiet. It makes people listen. So from 2017 until the pandemic, whenever I was in LA, because my wife is a Colombian woman, and prior to the pandemic, we were spending 3 or 4 or 5 months a year with her family in Colombia. So whenever I was back in LA, I kept my beard real long. And I would do stand-up, and it was really working. I had done some shows. I did a show in New York, and then the pandemic happened, and everything got stopped. But I kept writing, and then October 9th of this year, just a little over a month ago, I did my first show since. I did 26 minutes, and I got 25 applause breaks. And yeah, I know. It's on
character, does it play on your faith? It sounds like it's the kosher chef, the long beard and stuff like that. Self-depreciative humor, it sounds like, perhaps.
Well, it isn't really, because I am personally not very observant, right? Like I'm sort of an atheist.
Same, yeah. We're both Catholic boys, but like,
atheists as well.
Yeah, atheists. Yeah.
So, what I try to do is write material that's culturally evocative, but nothing really religious. I don't get into the religious aspects of anything.
Yeah, not the faith side of it, just the cultural perspective of it.
Yeah, and then I blend aspects of my life filtered through that prism, right? As if it was part of his life. And it continues to work. I just shaved because I got tired of waking up with hair in my mouth. I go to sleep and I wake up sucking on a carpet. So,
but hey, Marc. So can I ask you one question before I let you out here? Is you started in horror, and you've gone on, and your career has expanded into comedy throughout the years. And at the moment, we've seen a kind of a resurgence or a surgence of comedy actors or people that have come from a comedy background going into horror, like Chris Rock, John Krasinski, Jordan Peele. And like, do you think like that you'd ever maybe take a look at the horror genre again, maybe think about writing a movie or writing for a TV series, or kind of walking on the dark side, if you will, one more time?
Oh, sure. But not right now, knock on wood, I don't have to do anything for the money. So
passion projects.
It would be, but I'm more focused on trying to get my series, those 7 years made, because that's a story I really want to tell.
And would you do that as like a sitcom style?
No, I would do it as a single camera dramedy. I mean, it's funny, but it's more like a single camera dramedy.
Something like Curb Your Enthusiasm or something like that.
Yeah.
Cool. So Noel just disappeared.
Obviously, it's something I said.
He's got baby bladder. He's the worst. He's the worst. But so Noel, you just disappeared before we were going to end the show. So like,
Call baby bladder. It's a very real issue.
The only thing missing was him yelling, "Check, please."
But Marc. So you think like the only way you'd ever really step back into horror genre if it was something that really you felt passionate about, and otherwise you kind of see yourself kind of sticking in the more comedy realm?
I would, as an actor, do pretty much anything, right? As a writer or a producer, I would have to be very passionate about it. But as an actor, I'd love to do that again. So it wouldn't.
And does that come down to like a time commitment thing? Like, because like as an actor, it's a few weeks shoot, or if you're writing something, it could be a 9-10 month write. You come in, you produce, and you have to go through development, all these things. Like,
right. It's like raising a child.
Yeah.
You're in.
Something you're not in a rush to do.
I've already done that 3 times, and I have no desire. Love my children, but no desire to do that.
It's exhausting. I have a daughter. It's exhausting.
I have a Dalmatian. We're all in the same boat.
But Marc, it was awesome having you. But do you want to tell the folks where they can find you and all about your projects coming up and all that jazz?
Yes, Facebook as me, and also Elyid has my character has a Facebook page. Also
that's
on
ELYID, 2 separate words.
2 words, 2 separate words. That's correct. Thank you for pointing that out.
Just for audio, so yeah.
Yeah. So and I'm on Instagram and Twitter, all those places. I just hired a social media guy, so I'm gonna be on.
I told you we should have got a social media guy. I've been saying this.
We're building.
Hey, it's okay. You'll get there. You guys are pretty good. You'll get there.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks. Well, I'm pretty good, and you're.
Yeah. I don't drag you down.
You're amazingly. You're amazingly inconsistent. But
the only with having been to Ireland, I can tell you, I'm watching you guys. only in Ireland can you be a guest on a podcast and just sit here and watch those two guys interview each other.
That's it. Yeah. We just brought you here tonight.
Yeah, he's the buffer so we don't beat each other up.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
I'm happy to be the point of this isosceles triangle.
I don't speak Greek, but whatever.
We all have beards and none of us are women, so we're ahead.
Yeah, that's it.
So awesome, Mark. So lovely having you. So we're going to let you out here, right? And I'm your host, Vincent Green.
I'm your host, John too.
And we've got Carmack in the back. And this is MDK Presents Marc Sheffler. Thanks so much for for coming on, Mark. And it was awesome talking to you.
Stories I'll take with me for all the days.
We definitely have to get you to come back sometime because I'm sure you have a shit ton more stories for us to hear. Like,
yeah, if you'd be open to talking to us again, Mark, we would absolutely love that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on.
Your morning with us.
Thank you so much. And we'll chat to you soon, and the episode will be out in a couple of weeks. Thank you so much.
Okay. Take care, guys.
See you later, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.